Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As I always say, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all the support, the messages, all the things that you've sent to me, all the things that you've sent to the show. I always say this. Thank you guys so much for keeping in contact with those things, sending suggestions, sending questions. Really appreciate it. Gives me ideas for topics and also just helps build a really fun community here. So thank you for that and keep those coming. We have done a couple episodes on this topic, which I really enjoy in different ways, and that's talking about finding success at schools that are smaller or in smaller communities or in smaller areas. And we're going to dive into that again today because I think it's so much fun to talk to coaches who really take charge and build these successful programs at these smaller schools. We know that, a lot of the bigger schools with the high populations and huge facilities get a lot of attention, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's so important to platform and give an audience to talk about these smaller schools that maybe don't have all of those resources, but still find success regardless. Because as coaches, it's important that all of our players, regardless of what school they're at or what their situation is, are given the best basketball experience they possibly can be and are coached to the best of their abilities. And, all these schools should have, coaches who pour into them and want the best for them. So that's what we're going to get into today, about building success, building a winner at a small school. And we're going to jump right into it today with the head coach at the Universal, which is a real fun name too, the varsity team at the Universal varsity team, and we'll get into his story here. Very happy to be joined by Coach Konrad Dziewulski today. Coach, again, so happy to have you on today. How are things going?
Yeah, going good, man. It's a pleasure to be here, Coach Mike. I'm a fan of the podcast. I've
Thank you.
been doing my homework and listening to the
I
podcast. I
appreciate it.
love it all, man. So yeah, awesome to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. Seriously.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate the kind words as well. Coach, let's go ahead and jump right into you. Talk to us about your basketball journey. Talk about your coaching journey, and ultimately how'd you end up in the situation you're at right now?
Yeah, so my name's Coach Konrad. I'm 21 years old, still currently attending college, so I'm definitely on the younger aspect of the coaching realm, but I use it to my advantage, kind of being able to connect with these kids a little bit more. But I've been loving basketball ever since I could pick up a ball, which was about maybe 3 to 4 years old. Been watching it my whole life. Played high school sports at Revis High School. I was solid athlete, loved playing the game, was one of the leaders on my team as far as getting everybody structured in the right places at the right time. And then, after graduating high school, I took a little hiatus away from basketball, just kind of started getting into work, getting into studies. And then my buddies that I played high school ball with, they wanted to join a little rec league, and they're like, "Hey, it'd be funny if you like came and coached us, like just because, like it'd be like a funny thing to do." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And I did that. I really enjoyed it. So
Mm.
I actually ended up reaching out to Coach Nick Bahudis over at Revis High School, asking to just be a volunteer coach on the staff, and that's where I was reunited with my old sophomore head coach, Anthony Yurkovich, over at Revis High School, and I was on his staff as an assistant volunteer coach, and it really all started from there. I was able to kind of find myself within the coaching world as far as what works, what can I do, what can't I
Hmm.
do. And then I had, after that season was done with, which I believe was the 2022-2023 season, I had an old buddy of mine, Coach Jamal Ibrahim. He's now currently at Chicago State, D1 college here in Chicago. He was the head coach at Universal at the time. He's also very young. He's just a year older than me. And he told me, he's like, how serious are you about this coaching thing? I'm like, I'm pretty serious about it. I really enjoy doing it, and I could definitely see myself doing this, for a long time. And he told me he really likes, the work I've put in. He likes what he sees. I've known him since about 8th grade. So you could do the math there, since I'm 21.
Yeah.
But I've known him for a long time, and essentially he offered me to come on over to Universal and be the head middle school and head sophomore slash JV coach. And yeah, it's been a ride since there, and here we are at present day. Just got promoted to the head varsity position, and it's been a hell of a ride.
I have to ask to start with, because I'm sure those listening are wondering about what is that like coaching players who are just in some cases a few years younger than you. What was that like in terms of building I guess respect as a coach, or kind of making sure that they understood that you were, somebody of authority and the adult in the room? Was that something that came easy? Was that difficult? What was that like?
With my younger groups, with the middle school and the JV kids, it was pretty easy with them because, they weren't necessarily understanding everything as far as how life really works. So they're kind of
Yeah.
just navigating through life themselves. But, working up to the varsity guys, you're talking about 16, 17, 18-year olds. I'm only 2 to 3 years away from them. It was pretty tough at the beginning. I'm not gonna deny that. But they did respect me, and I give a lot of credit to those guys for allowing me to come in and to actually coach them. We battled all year with them. Us as a coaching staff, we had to fight for every ounce of effort that they gave us. It was
Hmm.
really a tough struggle, but it was all worth it because in that year, the 2023-24 season, we reached the IHSA regional championship for the first time in school history, and we were the lowest seed ever in IHSA history to beat a number one seed in that bracket.
That's awesome. I can't imagine what that excitement must have been like after the game with your guys to achieve something like that.
Oh yeah, it was surreal. It's surreal and just full of emotion because of the season we had. It was a very slow season. It wasn't great at all, but we really worked everything that we could work into the team going into those playoffs, and it
Hmm.
almost paid out. Almost got that championship win, but just couldn't pull it out. So
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Coach, I wanted to start with you kind of setting the stage here of where it is that you're at, because it's kind of an interesting situation. I think sometimes we think of small schools, and we think of these small like rural communities that maybe are not exactly in big metropolitan areas, but where you are in Bridgeview, it's definitely not the case, being right outside of Chicago. So I'm just kind of curious about kind of the culture, the demographics of kind of the school in the area, kind of set the stage for somebody who may be an outsider, if they were to kind of be in within the community, what they would see or notice about the area or the school itself.
Yeah, so I mean, Bridgeville, Illinois, it's a roughly decent sized little city. Of course, in the Chicagoland area, roughly a 30 to 40 minute drive to downtown Chicago. So I mean, not too far away. It's a population roughly between 15 to 20,000 people. So you could kind of more or less imagine that. For any of you Illinois listeners, Bridgeview essentially extends from about 87th Street down to about 103rd, right off of Harlem. The school is actually located on 93rd Street in Harlem. So if you were to view that area and you were to drive by there today, it's a very, 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 very Muslim area. The school I coach at is a Muslim private school. So a lot of the just naturally, there's a mosque foundation there as well. Around in that area, there's a lot of, Muslim based shops, a lot of, kind of Arabic clothing, Arabic food, um, very Middle Eastern type of style in that area. If you actually go on Apple Maps and you zoom in closer to where the school is at, it's kind of funny. It's actually called Little Palestine in that location. So, but it couldn't be more accurate, and it's pretty cool to see that, within like, such a diverse population and city that Chicago is, and in its suburbs, that you could find a city like Bridgeview that offers really a hub for a lot of Middle Easterns to come in and still feel like home.
And for you yourself, was that something that you found an easy environment to kind of acclimate to? Is that something that you felt that you were, really welcomed in, that you felt really comfortable in? What was that kind of process of stepping into, a community or an area like that?
Well, truth be told, I'm a Polish Catholic, so pretty opposite
Yeah, yeah.
of the area. But nonetheless, I had the connection with Coach Jamal. And just throughout my whole life, I had friends that were Arabic and Muslim. So I've always been able to connect with the Arabic and Muslim community. And coming in, there were some questions, of course, of me coming in, kind of being like, oh, the Catholic, being white, yada yada yada. But the parents did really welcome me and made me feel like home. And a lot of credit goes to them for actually accepting me into that environment when I know it's a very Muslim heavy populated area. So it couldn't have been easy to just be okay with a Catholic coming in and teaching their kids essentially.
Yeah, yeah, that's really awesome, and it's so cool to kind of hear in that story. It's just kind of a cool reminder, right, about like how much something like sports and things of that nature kind of can transcend all of these differences that might exist between us, and just kind of all like work together for something like that, whether it's education or coaching or sports. How it just kind of brings everybody together. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. You mentioned before we started, and so I'll definitely make sure that you touch on that. But at your school, Universal, there's definitely some unique situations and unique challenges and things that were presented to you as a coach. And I am curious about one, as you kind of elaborate on what those situations were, but two, how you work to not use those as an excuse, how you still maintained a high standard and how you and the coaching staff still, worked through those and still were able to deliver like a really positive basketball experience despite whatever those challenges or situations were.
Yeah, so I mean, to this day, I think community involvement and also support from the administration is a very tough thing to push for when we're talking about basketball at Universal. Um, the more kind of main sports at that school, really just the main sport is soccer. Wrestling comes a close second. So basketball isn't really one of the top things at the school. Basketball at Universal, from what I've seen, and also being at Revis when I was playing at Revis, we always play Universal every single year. So just kind of knowing the history of Universal for a while, to be on the Universal basketball team used to mean that okay, cool, you're on the team, you're one of the cool people in the school. You're kind of just one of those more you're a figure, you're a more public figure to the outside world and you're viewed cool for that. And let me tell you, when I first came in, I found it so difficult to go from an environment like Revis, which was a 4A public school. Kids that were on the team wanted to just compete and didn't care
Mm.
about their public status, versus coming to a small 1A school like Universal, and everybody knows everybody in that school. Um, so to them, status is everything, and since that's the case, egos were very high, and that was the main struggle to honestly get everybody to hone in and actually buy in. And this includes the administration and the community. Parents had a tough time understanding sometimes why we're practicing at 7 in the morning. Why are we doing extra workouts? Like, why aren't we just sticking to a regular practice schedule? So through time, we've been able to kind of change the culture here, change the environment. And we've used it to our advantage. Like, instead of making an excuse like, oh yeah, we only get to practice at this time, it's like, no, like, because of this, it's gonna make us this much stronger. Like, we're motivated to beat you guys because we're so limited in what we can do. We know you guys aren't, but we're gonna come in and kick your butt anyways because that's who we are.
Did you have to, with that, like, change the mentality of the program in terms of like making them believe that they could be successful. I get the sense from kind of what we talked about that traditionally they may not have been the most successful wins and loss wise. What kind of went into kind of reframing that and making your guys, really, believe that, they were going to be competing and they were going to be successful and start to rack up some wins?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, but before we got there, the conference that we play in is called the Metro Prep Conference. Um, and it's a relatively weak conference. It only recently got better. So for a long time, Universal ran and dominated that conference, which is why egos were so high.
Mm,
Um, and kind of going into more recent years since I got there, all the other schools have caught up now.
caught
You know,
up.
they're getting transfers, getting prospects, they're kind of homegrowing their kids too. So it's been tough nonetheless. So to get everybody to buy in, yeah, it was a big mentality switch and change that we had to instill in every single kid. They were no longer the top dogs in the conference, and it took a toll. It was really a hard realization time for a lot of these kids that dang, like we're really just not that school anymore. But with accepting that came more motivation. And once they actually fully accepted that is when we started to find our role and find our pace, our rhythm, and that's when we had success.
And so the other kind of aspect or kind of like follow-up question that I kind of had with that is I was thinking about um what were some of those, I guess, like moments where maybe there was a little bit of like conflict? Was it with like the practice schedule and stuff like that? Where were those things where like those guys were, really starting to be like uncomfortable and you were really like pushing them out of their comfort zone? Was it just the level of work that they were doing when it was that you were practicing? Where was that sort of like, hey, this is, gonna be a little bit difficult for you, but we're gonna do things this way because we know this is what needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just to just some of the examples you provided, all of the above. You
Yeah.
know, like whether it was practicing at an early time, practicing at a very late time, practices being longer than usual, the things we actually worked on in practice, they were all different. That's one of the tasks we challenged ourselves to when taking this job, or me specifically now becoming the head coach, is we're trying to build a program here. We, ever since I came here, it was just a basketball team. It wasn't a
Mm.
program. So now we have the task of creating and turning this team into a program where there's just continuity at all three stages. And it's been tough so far, but we're making strides, we're making progress, and it's looking very promising in the near future.
So as you talk about kind of building this success, does that mean kind of getting all the middle school and the feeder schools aligned and trying to like build things up like vertically that way?
Yeah, so I mean, just we don't really have feeder schools. It's a K through 12 school, so
Oh,
everything
okay.
we
So yeah,
get
it
is
all begins
homegrown.
in there. Okay.
So, especially with me being the middle school coach ever since I came in, I've been working with some of these kids since they've been seventh and eighth graders. Now they're on my freshman team, on my JV team. Some of them got bumped up to varsity, and we keep working with them continuously. And that's why I say that the future is so bright, is because we've been able to instill this culture and the expectations from a younger age. So it's a lot easier when they're coming up through the ranks of high school for them to buy into that and actually apply that, compared to when we first got here, when I first got here, and we had seniors, kind of trying to get them to buy into something new. A very tough thing for us to accomplish, but definitely a lot easier being able to grow these kids from when they were younger.
Yeah, no, no, definitely, because then they see you, they got familiarity with you, and then, by the time I imagine, if they've been around since, playing since, a younger age, a middle school, shoot, by the time they get out into the high school level, they've had exposure to you for quite a while at that point.
Yeah, no doubt.
The other thing I wanted to, give you a little opportunity to talk about, Coach, 'cause I'm sure our listeners would be fascinated by this, is of course at a small school, the facilities that you have are not necessarily going to be the same that you see at these bigger 4A, 5A, 6A schools. Talk a little bit about the situations that kind of came with some of the facilities that you had, and then also how you didn't use those as, an excuse for your guys, and how you still were able to, get all the things done that you needed regardless.
Yeah, I mean, just keeping it on the basketball court, our actual court is not regulation. The we don't have actual space for benches, so the benches are almost like when the kids sit on the bench, their feet are on the court. Um, the rims and the backboards, those weren't regulation just until this season. We were supposed to host a regional game. Actually, the run we made into the regional championship, our playing game that year, we were supposed to have at home. We had to play that at the other school because our court was not regulation. Um, it was just so many things as far as the court goes. I mean, as far as the width on a regular basketball court, if you were to imagine at a big high school,
Mhm.
it might go from the sideline to about the lane line on the other side. As far as the lane line extending from the baseline up to the elbow, it was the opposite lane line. So you could kind of imagine how small it was width
Yeah.
wise, and then length. It was probably from baseline to the opposite free throw line. So just when you're practicing at consistently every day and then you go and have to play a bigger school with a bigger gym, the kids aren't accustomed to playing on that big court. um our weight rooms were also very lackluster. We maybe have a couple of free weights, we have about two benches, a couple of smith machines, and that's about it. Our facilities aren't great whatsoever, but you you better bet your money that we use them as much as we could. And if it wasn't there, we were taking them up to, if some Illinois listeners might know this, but we would take them up to Swallow Cliff. It's like a set of
Yeah.
whole bunch of stairs. We would just have them run up and down that thing all spring and summer. Um, and that's where we get their conditioning in. So instead of making it excuses, we just turned it into, okay, this puts us really at an advantage because now going into these games, these teams are going to expect way less of us when really we're going to push ourselves the hardest we can because we know how much less we have than them.
Yeah. The thing about that too, and I imagine, is your guys know that, like, hey, we don't have the same, facilities. We're not, given the same things that all these other schools have, and we don't have, regulation this, and our weight rooms aren't exactly the same as everybody else's. And I think that for programs that can either go one of two ways, either like players, really get down on that and they really, just like feel like, I guess, embarrassed, or they're just, not as motivated anymore, or they use it as like fuel and feel like it's puts a chip on their shoulder and they're more motivated, and like they use it as kind of like a slight against them, like, oh, okay, this is, there's some disadvantages that we have, but we're going to push past it. It seems like your guys kind of use it as, even increased motivation or increased fuel to, not let that circumstance like define them necessarily.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, at a point this season, we had Coach Mustafa Suleiman. He's the owner and CEO of Exposure Runs. He was the head coach this season. Um, they brought him in, but he saw immediately that we he moved our practices to a pavilion, like to a community YMCA. Like that just gives you an idea of how lackluster and how small really our facilities were. So even then, regardless, when we were practicing at our gym, we just did everything we could. If we would just run twice as much to try to make up the work.
To move on to the next part, Coach, about um the success, especially that you've had, over the past year or so, and going into, further into the playoffs than you ever have before. What do you owe that success to? What do you think has really like gotten that program, to reach those heights that it hasn't before, right? We talked about, there's all these potential, limitations and things that could be used as excuses, or things that, could say, oh, like, we can't be successful because X, Y, and Z. But obviously that hasn't been the case, since your program has reached, new heights that it hasn't before. What do you kind of owe that success to?
I hate to gloat about it, being a coach, but um, a superb and excellent coaching staff is definitely a must and a requirement at a situation like this, and we were definitely blessed with that. Go going into that playoff run that we had just 2 seasons ago. At that time, Coach Jamal Ibrahim was the head varsity coach. I was on assistant staff. Coach Malcolm Cherry was also on the staff. We all do our own things. We all coach AAU. We study the game like no other, and we use our youth to an advantage. Instead of sometimes being so stubborn and maybe hard-headed as some other coaches may be because they're wiser, they're older. We use our youth to an advantage. We take the criticism from our players, and we let it be like an open table. We find that if we give them a voice, and they truly see an impact in their voice, it empowers them, and they feel and just play so much better knowing that they are empowered by their own coaches.
So what sort of things are your guys saying then that you're, maybe that you took to heart and made some adjustments or changes based off
Yeah,
of?
I mean, just simply, even just giving an example from this season, we really wanted to walk into this season, um, running a full court press and going, in the half court running a man to man. Um, it just did not work. It just did not work, and there were a multitude of factors for it. I sometimes I believe our kids just weren't athletic enough to be able to run the press. They didn't understand a man to man as much as they should have. Even when we would try to work it into practices, it would look great on one day. The next day, it's like, oh my gosh, we're back to square one, aren't we? And the kids just openly came up to us about it. They're like, coaches, like we can't, we don't know how to do this, and it's really affecting our confidence in our play. So we just went settled into a zone, sometimes alternating to a 2-3, a 1-2-2, 1-3-1, just trying to do anything we could to throw off the other team from being able to identify the zones. Um, and it gave the kids confidence that their coaches were listening to the feedback they were giving. um some drills that we did in practice, some kids wanted to run certain drills. Maybe they saw from a different coach, maybe they saw something on the internet. Sometimes we put in some of those drills, and we found them very beneficial, not only for the actual work that was being done, but again for the confidence, because if the kids don't play with confidence, then it don't matter how good they are, they will not play
Mm.
well at all.
So for you, that's is probably a really fascinating, reflection and experience to go through when you're really passionate about, one element of coaching or one style of coaching or a philosophy, whether it's offense or defense, like you mentioned, but then to have to, remove yourself from that to go and do something else, like that takes a lot of open-mindedness, I think, as a coach to go from something that you're really passionate about and really want to do versus, the things that are gonna benefit your players and the things that they want to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as a staff, it also takes a lot of selflessness, and putting our egos to the side, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. Very, very beneficial, very crucial in any coaching situation, in my opinion, because if things aren't working and you're just gonna keep hagging it the same way every year, you'll never get anywhere. You got to try new things.
So what is that then balance kind of as a follow-up to that of like being open-minded and wanting to listen to what your guys have to say and, being able to adjust to that versus like your own non-negotiables or your own coaching staff's non-negotiables? How do you kind of balance like, hey, this is where I'm willing to be open-minded and be flexible with versus like, no, this is like what we're going to do because I know this is what's best for the team.
Yeah, so I think as far as the balance goes, that's something that's determined every single year. Because you get essentially a different set of players almost every year. Sure, you've got some returning guys. You always have new guys. Unless you're growing them from the freshman level and having them play on varsity all the way into their senior year. Um, you're always gonna have new kids. They have a different set of skills, and you have to adjust. And our only non-negotiables are really the way we warm up in practice, whether it's the stretches we do, whether it's the actual warm-up drills we do. Those are really our non-negotiables. And when it's time for plays, as far as
Mm.
offensive sets or defensive schemes, as far as positioning goes, those are non-negotiables. We tell them, like, unless you know you can't play the position, don't tell us otherwise, because we've done the study, we've watched the film, we know where we could put you in places to succeed. Now you just have to entrust in us that we're gonna do everything in our ability to help you succeed.
Yeah, that's really cool though to know that your guys believe in that though. They say, okay, like this, coach is willing to listen to us up on this, but they also know like, hey, like these are the plays we have to run because this is what, coaches really believe in. And to have them be able to know like this is where we can have an open-minded discussion versus like, hey, this is I know a non-negotiable, we're going to run it exactly the way the coach says. I mean, that's a really good relationship I imagine that the coaching staff has with their players at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a lot of work, and a lot of arguments do happen in the process, but I mean, it's all beneficial though. Like, those conversations need to happen, and nobody said it's going to be easy.
Right, yeah,
Like,
no,
none of this stuff is going to be easy or was meant to be easy. That success doesn't come that way.
curious because I forgot to ask this coach, but what are you looking at in terms of for on the high school level? How many guys do you have on your program and how much of that represents kind of like the school population? Because I can imagine you're not choosing from hundreds and hundreds of guys that could be on your program. I imagine it's kind of it's a small school population, so there's not a whole lot of players that you necessarily have to choose from in order to build a roster.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Per gender per class, there's about 50 to 75 kids. Meaning in the school, we've got about 50 to 75 boys that are in 12th grade and in 11th and in 10th. It's a very small pool. So, really, who comes to tryouts is almost dang near the people that are going to be on the team, aside from a few exceptions that just simply weren't good enough or didn't fit what we were trying to do. Um, but yeah, I think at tryouts this last season that just passed, we at our varsity tryouts we might have had 25 to 30 at most. We had at the end of the season 14 kids on the varsity roster. So you could see
Uh,
how there weren't many cuts made. And it's hard. It's hard to work with that sometimes because you are sometimes really lacking, whether it's the true point guard, whether it's a strong defensive rebounder. Sometimes you can't pull from that, or just a simple athlete. Compared to some of the bigger private schools, they've got a multitude of athletes. Maybe they just don't fit specific basketball sets and schemes and game plans, but as far as just being an athlete, there's a multitude of them. For us, it's essentially there's multiple kids playing three sports because those are the only athletes in the school.
so with that, then you will probably have situations where you got guys that aren't maybe the same level in terms of basketball skills. I'm sure you have a wide array of guys who maybe have talent and skill and been playing a long time, but you also, since you have a small pool to choose from, right, you might have guys who don't have a lot of experience or haven't played a lot. You don't have that depth, like you mentioned, that you would have at some of these bigger schools. So, how are you and your coaching staff kind of able to make all of your guys like viable on the court, knowing that there's like these wide array of skill sets out there?
Well, we had to be honest with ourselves at the start of each season and when, workouts come around before the season, and just realize where we at on a fundamental basis. Because with some kids, with some teams or groups, we've had them have better fundamentals than the next group. And it's really a different challenge every year. So it really comes with first identifying the level we're at as a team, as a unit, at the fundamental level. Because if the fundamentals aren't set, then no way we could start going into, running 4-out 1 in offenses, running some college level things, running inbound plays. None of that's going to work if we can't establish the fundamentals. And of course, the array of talent definitely differs on the team. We've got guys that play AAU, we've got guys that only play basketball when the season comes around. So as far as getting everybody on the same page, a lot of our main points are really just revolving around effort and consistency, because the one thing we can't afford with our wide array of skill sets and skill level is being consistently inconsistent. In whatever we're doing, we have to stay consistent, or if not, then things just won't develop and people won't learn.
That I imagine, because it would for me like kind of creates unique situations where you mentioned about how much that you kind of study the game and learn at the game. I mean, you coach at the club level as well. So there's a lot that you're absorbing and taking in that I imagine you would really like to, implement, that you'd like to teach, that you'd like to coach, and you have, all this basketball knowledge at you. But also knowing that not all your guys or your team as a whole are necessarily like ready for that. So you really have to be like conscientious, I imagine, about what decisions you make in terms of, okay, this is like what our guys can handle. Like I have all these ideas and all these things I want to do, but this is what we need to focus on for this particular group, and figuring out like what to, let go and what to really like focus on. That's not always easy to do.
Yeah, like, and I think that goes back to the statement we said before, as far as the coaching staff having putting their ego to the side and being selfless, because you know, going into a season, I could go ahead and just implement an offense that might be college level, whether it's a Kansas or Duke based offense and some of their scheme sets, and my players don't understand it, and coaches could come to the game and be like, "Oh, he's actually got a good system. The kids just don't know what they're doing." It's not about that. Really, for me, success comes with winning games and actually empowering the kids. And that won't happen if I'm just going to be selfish about making myself look good with showing my basketball knowledge versus actually doing things that are going to work for my team. Sometimes we just run a simple 5 out offense because at times that's all they can do, but we make that work.
Well, yeah, like to your point about like somebody could, if somebody were to go in and say like, oh, like they have a really good system, but like players don't like execute it, then it's probably not really a good system then, right?
Right.
Because if your players aren't executing it, then what, yeah, like you said, like what are you coaching for? Like to show off
Exactly.
how much you know, if even if your players can't do it.
Right, yeah, no doubt. And unfortunately, I've seen some coaches do that, and it's like, man, it's so frustrating because it makes us just as a coaching brotherhood look bad at times because sometimes it appears that we put our interests above the players, and it really shouldn't be like that.
Right. No, 100% agreed. I was curious to a point that you mentioned earlier, Coach, about how you talked about you have guys who play, AAU. They treat basketball really seriously, and then you said you have other guys who just play like when the season comes around. Does that ever create any sort of like difficulties where you have guys who, are really serious and really all about it, and this is something that they're dedicating year round, and they have teammates who aren't maybe as committed on it. I mean, they're still trying, but they aren't as committed. Like, is it still easy to kind of bring the guys together and create an actual team bond with a group like that?
Oh, so I mean, as far as a bond on the basketball court, it makes it difficult. Because you've got guys that play basketball year round. They understand where they should be on the floor at certain times based on their skill set and what they can do. And then you've got guys that like I said, just play during the season and are trying to be Steph Curry out there. When they're really not. So on the court, it's hard to find that bond between everybody because sometimes the kids just don't want to accept they're not LeBron James. Um, but other kids are like, okay, like this is what I can do. I can attack the basket. I'm gonna do that. Then I'm not gonna settle for 3 pointers outside the arc. Um, but off the court, like I said, everybody knows everybody at the school, and we're lucky enough that everybody on the team are they're close with one another.
Mm.
Being Muslim people, they pray together at the mosque. They pray together before games. It is really a tight brotherhood. Now it's just really about applying that onto the basketball court.
So for you, I'm just kind of curious now, as kind of a follow-up to that. What do you kind of see now on this varsity role as kind of your next step now is in sort of, you know, bringing that, on the court brotherhood together, kind of bringing them together as basketball players? Like, what do you kind of see as your, next steps with kind of that culture building and continuing to like build that team bond on the court?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe what I intend and plan on doing is establishing a level of accountability that they haven't seen before. Um, the one problem with being at this school is um maybe not necessarily a problem, just kind of like a fact because it is a fact. The tuition ain't cheap. So they don't
Yeah.
come necessarily from tough situations, and they are gifted a lot of things throughout their life. And truth be told, I love them all dearly, but sometimes they do act like little entitled brats, and it makes it hard to kind of coach them hard when they haven't been spoken to like that all their life. So bringing a level of accountability, with this group I have now becoming sophomores, juniors, seniors, they're used to that type of coaching and kind of, understanding that we need to build with one another on the court, and that takes, consistency in attendance and in the way we say things to one another. Now as far as just being accountable, if you miss a practice the day before a game, don't expect to start if you're a starter. It's going to be a real culture shock for some of them, but these are the type of steps we need to take in order for accountability to actually take place, because you know for a lot of them, they've just been gifted many things in their life. They haven't had to work for a dime. And it's hard when they come to the basketball court now to be accountable for doing things wrong. And they tend to ask questions about that, but they'll find out really quick this year that the things that have flown in the past as far as not attending practice and doing other things, it's just not going to fly anymore.
So that's gonna, I imagine, going to be, like you said, it'd be a lot different. So I imagine one of the things that's going to be on your mind, and I'll let you elaborate on that, is, really making sure now that, parents are and other like family members are really on board with that and really understanding about the commitment and what you guys are going to be held or what their, players going to be held accountable to, because this is going to be a change for them, and you're going to have to maybe be having different conversations with parents than you've had to in the past.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, just going into this season, the plan is to have often and consistent parent meetings. Whether it's before the season, whether it's mid-season, whether it's postseason, those meetings need to happen so the parents can understand why we're doing the things we're doing and why it's right. Um, the school also established an athletic committee, which is going to help in some of the process of kind of organizing things, whether it's practice scheduling or getting news out to the parents. Um, so things are looking brighter as far as like connecting and really talking with the parents, and having them buy into the program.
And I think that's, really, really big on a small school. And that kind of leads into like things that maybe I want to ask you about that have worked maybe in the past, or things that are currently working right now. And in such a, you know, small school, and it's kind of a very unique, kind of very tight-knit community. How have you and coaching staffs previously kind of built, excitement and momentum, and kind of brought the community in and had them support the program? Is that something that's kind of always been there? Is that something that's currently ongoing? How much does the local area and the parents in the community kind of embrace like the basketball program itself?
So honestly, it's something that's I would say under construction.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
We're still in the process and trying to um get the community to be involved. And that starts with this gym being built. We're finally getting a new gym in May, and it's going to be a nice gym. And it's going to be a community gym. Community members are going to be able to come in and rent out courts and be on the courts, and there's a walking track, and it really is, both a space for athletics but also just for community members to come by and be in the area. So I think that'll be a nice and effective way to kind of get the community more aware about our program. As far as getting them to buy in, I think it comes with we got to show some success. And we started to get that when we made our deep run in the playoffs. We put the school on notice that the basketball program is legit, and it's one that should be recognized and appreciated more. Because previous to that, it was, like I said, just a team. It wasn't a program.
Yeah, and so that's a challenge that you're probably really embracing those this idea of like, hey, like the community and people are maybe not aware of our program, or maybe they kind of know but they're not fully bought in yet. So that must be a fun thing for you to know, like, hey, like we have a real opportunity to really build momentum and really put this, on the map in the community. And I imagine that's something you must be super excited about being able to do.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. Because getting the community involved just automatically means more attendance as well to the games, and more attendance gets our players more riled up and more excited to play the games. And when the team's excited to play games, that's when you start finding confidence within each and every one of your players.
No, definitely. I wanted to ask about, now that you're stepping into this varsity role, like ex what experience are you going to draw from assistant roles to kind of use now as a varsity coach? And what I mean by that is, now that you've been in that assistant role, what are you kind of looking for in terms of your assistants and lower level coaches now that you're kind of in the varsity position?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as the assistant coaches that will be on the staff, of course, I'm gonna be bringing back Malcolm Cherry. He's been absolutely awesome and superb in the job he does. And the qualities we really look for, is really the things I've mentioned previously, is being able to put the ego aside, be selfless, and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. It isn't easy to being able to take criticism from your players, and it's not really in an environment that a lot of coaches are used to. So, when we are going to begin the vetting process and kind of our coaching search, that's one of our number one must-haves, is the being comfortable with being uncomfortable, because
Hmm.
we are put in a lot of uncomfortable situations sometimes, not just from the players, but from the parents, from the administration, from outside, factors, whether it's being out of their schools. Um, it's not comfortable to be a part of the Universal Star coaching staff, but that's what we need to, that's what a coach needs to be ready to face. I
Yeah,
don't know why it
yeah,
took
yeah,
me so
yeah.
long to find that word, but
No, no.
yeah, they got to be ready to face it. And also just a relentless work ethic. If they don't want to come to work more than I do, then it's just not going to work, because the same way I was held accountable for when I, had to come to practice and either run drills or give input, the same way I'm going to hold the rest of the staff is, you got to come in, you have to have the open mind, and you better come with some ideas and some input, because if not, and if you're not going to be here in the best interest of the team, it's going to be rough for everybody, not just for you, not just for me. It's going to be rough for everybody, and that just makes it so much less enjoyable.
Yeah, that commitment is key. And I think to find, those people who are just as committed. It's super important. I know that I've talked to other coaches who have hired people in the past, or have had people on their staff who are, really like big good basketball minds and really like the game, but maybe they're not, committed to the community or committed to the specific program that they're at. And for you, in your situation, you need to kind of have the commitment to the basketball and the coaching, but also the embracement of the community and the population and the circumstances that your school's in. Like, it has to be a complete and total buy-in into every aspect of the program.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love to live by, this statement, and I tell the kids all the time, if you're not going 110, then what are you doing it for?
No, I like that. No, 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 definitely. Like, all in for sure.
Yeah.
A couple other quick questions I wanted to ask Coach before we hit our concluding segment. I was curious about, what advice would you give to a coach who might be stepping into like this small school environment, one that doesn't have a lot of resources, maybe is in, a small population area, not a lot of basketball success. If you were to talk to somebody who's like, hey, coach, I'm taking this position, very small school, very low population, don't know exactly what to do or what to start or what I should be, looking to do to find success. What would you tell a coach who might be finding themselves in that situation?
I think one of the main factors and kind of qualities a coach needs to have in that type of situation is to be disciplined. Um, whether it's presenting yourself correctly to the kids around you, whether it's the way you hold yourself and show yourself to parents, or at games, you have to be disciplined and be a role model because if you're not, then the kids are gonna take advantage of it. You know, there it's a small school. Um, kids are gonna talk with one another every day because everybody knows everybody, and they're gonna find ways to manipulate what, some of your weaknesses. So you really have to come out and be strong, be disciplined, and also just set clear boundaries as well. Because if you keep the boundaries unclear, kind of messy lines, not really coloring inside the lines, then that's where you find the frustrations happening that just aren't necessary at all. Um, expectations, discipline, all of those factors need to happen on day one. As soon as you step foot in that building, it needs to happen immediately. Or, the longer you prolong that process, the harder and longer it is going to be to actually build a program and not just a team.
The sentiment that kind of get from hearing what you just said and kind of your answers and your thoughts previously is that at a small school, I mean any school, but really at a small schools you really have to be all in. You really have to put everything into it because you may not have those structures or those, things in place that other things are at. So you have to really, give everything it is that you got because that program is going to probably need, every ounce of energy that you can pour into it in order for it to, see that level of success.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're not going 110, then you might as well see yourself out the door because, at a small school, you need to, like you mentioned. It takes a very heavy toll on the mental aspect of, I think, of a person. Um, because it does get draining at times, especially if you're not having a great season. It's important also if you are going into a small school, um, to be the head varsity coach, you need to have the right people around you, whether it's the staff, whether it's just in your personal life. You need to keep a good crowd,
Mm.
because those are going to be the people lifting you up after a bad day. And if you don't have anybody like that doing that for you, then eventually you're gonna start projecting that onto your kids, and that's where you end up getting fired.
Oh, yeah, well, in your situation too, in particular, right? I mean, there is unique circumstance that you're in, right? At a private school, a lot of money is being like paid into that, and so, there is like some of these unique situations that you find yourself in, or other schools, or other coaches who are at schools like that, where, the vibe may be a little bit different, or the feeling may just be a little bit different because of the fact that the where the money is coming from and the parents, the literal buy-in to the program's a little bit different. So there's these different elements also that I'm sure you have to, consider as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's like I said, it's a new thing every year. If it
Right?
isn't one, it's something new. Or if it's not something new, it's something that's already existed, but it's came around and made its course. So, there's always something, but it's important to be able to navigate your way through that and just stay level-headed and be disciplined in what you're doing.
And I, and I also like like that point that you mentioned about being a small school that you also brought up too, and I'm sure that you're dealing with and are aware of is that the visibility and the eyes that are on you are a little bit different than at a bigger school where there's maybe a whole other multitude of programs and a whole bunch of other population going on. I imagine that they feel at times maybe there's that magnifying glass or that like all eyes are kind of on you in the program because it's such a small environment that you got to make sure that you take care of yourself too and find ways to step back and recharge and refocus.
Oh yeah, and then being in a small school, every parent is gonna feel, and the fact that they pay a good amount of money to even attend the school, and also pay money for their kid to be in athletics. The parents feel a sense of entitlement as well to be able to give their input or maybe make their change, like to influence some type of change. Um, that's just natural. That's just how it occurs. And um again, being at a small school and even on game day, you're gonna be approached by the most randomest little second grader, just talking to you. So you just gotta be prepared for that, and just really come into that building with a smile on your face and ready to go.
Yeah, how cool is that though too, that like, to have that sort of level of attention and for your players to have that sort of eyes on them or attention them from a younger age in a way, like it kind of does make them like celebrities or like famous within the school because, they are well known, which, as you mentioned, can also lead to some egos as well, but it also gives them, kind of this status that kind of makes it kind of exciting and special for them to be a part of an athletic program.
Yeah, it almost makes it like professional sports in a way, for some of these kids, and it's kind of funny. It does it for myself too. At the school, at Universal, if you're a part of a staff of one of the more premier sports at the school, so soccer, basketball, wrestling, the kids know you. Like the whole school knows who
Hmm.
you are, and they will follow your socials. So, you definitely gotta be careful what you're putting out on the internet. So, yeah, no, it is definitely a fun experience. But it does come with the downsides, of course, of the egos flaring and yada yada yada. But it's a cool vibe to be a part of for sure.
That's awesome. Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions I ask every guest, so I'll kind of jump right in here to this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career, what is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing that our listeners would be able to learn from?
Ooh, that's a good one because I've had a multitude of situations arise. Man, I would honestly say the situation I'm in now, as a coach, where in the past 3 years, this is the third head coach that is now going to head the program. Um, I think in this moment, it's very important the way I navigate in what I do, and also just kind of the way I present myself, whether it's on the internet or whether it's publicly, because I also do have my own podcast. I actually have a podcast with Coach Malcolm. So,
Hey, there you go.
yeah, so it's like we definitely we're careful in kind of what we can say and kind of how we present ourselves. So, I mean, just as far as the coaching moment, me being this young and being able to head coach a varsity program just shows that it doesn't matter what age you're at or um kind of what situation you're in. If you really apply yourself and you show and that you are worthy of the position and you could show and lead by example, you will be rewarded for that. And it's important to keep reminding yourself that. And shoot, if you're not going to be rewarded for that, then maybe it's time to move on elsewhere. That's also something I've considered a couple times is possibly going to a different school and coaching. Um, but I've just tried to stay level headed, be honest with myself, um, in everything I do, whether it's running my AAU program or now being the head coach at Universal. Just being honest with myself and remembering, how I got here and to not forget who I was before I got here either.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of lose your identity or lose yourself in this sometimes. So being true to who you are, and I guess to that point, knowing who you are so that you know if you're getting away from that and being somebody else is super important.
Yeah, for sure.
To wrap up, Coach, what I like to do is give every guest what I like to call this 60-second soapbox, but you can go over 60 seconds. It's just a nice title I like to put to it, but I like to use it as a platform for you to get out a final message, a closing thought, a final idea, something that you leave the listeners with. You can take it any direction that you want, basketball wise or coaching wise. It's your soapbox after all. So, Coach, I'm just going to go ahead and give you the floor, and I'm just going to let you take it from here.
Cool. Yeah, I just, really wanted to just start off by thanking you, Coach Mike, for letting me be on the podcast, for interviewing me. It's been a hell of an experience, and to all the listeners listening, um, I appreciate you guys, even wanting to listen to, a 21-year-old yap on about being a coach. Um, it's it's definitely a cool and unique experience to be in, and I definitely am thankful and grateful for it every day. Um, I am on all socials. If you guys would want to follow me on Instagram, it's coach_KD41. Um, that is usually where I will get back to people where I kind of post and do things. If anybody in the Chicagoland area wants to come out to a game, please let me know. Hit me up on Instagram. I'd be more than welcome to accommodate to you and kind of just give you a little tour around the school, even, and just kind of get to know people. We're a growing community at Universal. We're a growing basketball powerhouse, I like to say, and I look forward to getting to know more people within the sports world, within the coaching world. Coaches, if there's anything you guys hear on this podcast, because me myself listening to this podcast, I've listened to a couple of other coaches speak. If you guys ever want to, hit me up, whether you're in the Chicagoland area or not, and just want input, advice, schemes, anything, or set up games if you're in Illinois, please let us know. Please let me know. Again, my socials on Instagram is coach_KD41. And yeah, I appreciate the time, Coach Mike. It's been surreal. It feels a lot more real now, kind of getting interviewed. That this varsity position has hit me. So
Hey, you are ready for it, man. Just hearing you talk and hearing the things that you've shared and the excitement that you have for where you're at and the coaching profession in basketball. Now, I'm excited to follow along with your journey and see where it is that you take the program and where your coaching journey takes you. This is great. As somebody who is from the Chicago area, and I love being able to give you the platform to talk. I love hearing about the success that you've had, and also real happy to hear about the new improvements that are coming your way at Universal. It's such an exciting time for you to be a part of the program and see the guys, get all of those things that they've needed for a long time. So, Coach Dziewulski, I just want to say thanks again, man. Best of luck going forward. I know that you'll be hitting the ground running hard this season coming up. So thanks again for sharing everything, and best of luck going forward.
yeah, thank you. Good luck to you as well. Keep going with this podcast, man. It's awesome. I love it. So keep going. It's a great thing you got going here.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.